Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical, political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on the power of the executive branch, known as the power of the sword, is Len Carter. Len is an investment banker, business consultant, and private investor. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter.
Good evening. It's 6:30 Wednesday evening, so I'm back with you again. It's my pleasure. I always look forward to being with you, my cohorts, in this podcast. It's not the numbers that I'm looking for. I haven't spent time advertising the program or publicizing it in any way. In due course, if people find it and like it, hopefully they'll love it. It'll have a natural growth. If it doesn't, I'm happy to convey whatever wisdom I have. And most importantly, in the process, I hope I can bring happiness to people with the ideas that I convey above and beyond the current events that we discuss. So, like always, in recent history, every week brings news that's depressing. Not only in history, in the course of life. We always think ours is the worst of times and it used to be much better or something. History has always got depressing events. We don't focus on it as much. In the old days, we didn't have all the communication vehicles, media vehicles, to let us know all the drastic things that are going on in the world, floods and tsunamis and airplane crashes and all kind of people dying all over the world from all different kind of pandemics and automobile accidents and trains that go off the rail. There's always bad news. So in order to make a program, in order to appeal to listeners or readers, newspapers and media outlets have to report what's depressing, because good news is not exciting. It may be exciting to the family that experiences it, if they have a new baby or somebody graduates with honors. That's uplifting, but that doesn't affect the whole community that they're so interested in seeing the headlines announcing that. So I think the obituary get more readers than new baby birth for sure. So it's a commentary on human behavior, I guess, because in order to make the headlines, it's got to be bad news. So before we start, I'd like to alert you to the fact that we're going to deal with issues that came up this week that were upsetting, disorienting, create arguments within families, within communities, within countries. I mean, it's just unbelievable that every week there's conflicts and belligerent interactions between human beings since the beginning of the man, So before we launch into today's podcast, first I want to welcome back Len Carter. It's delightful to have him back. He's a genius. He's charming. He's even when he beats up on me and disagrees with me, he does it in a manner that I can't be angry with him. I feel like punching him in the mouth, but I can't be angry with him. So thank you for coming and joining our group once again. But because it's depressing, and I know it's going to be depressing because it's depressing within families. So if I say something and you have a different political view, you're going to be angry. You're going to take issue with me. You're going to, if you're angry enough, you just turn off. The good thing about media is at least you could turn it off. You can't always turn off your family that's sitting next to you. So before we launch, I'd like to give you something uplifting, because to me the most important thing in this world is for me to make my family happy, my community happy, my country happy, my fellow man happy. I don't think there's anything more important than that. As a matter of fact, we see that because the demand is so great for ideas on happiness. Dale Carnegie wrote a book called Stop Worrying and Start Living. Is that the title, Len?
It was called, let's see, Stop Worrying and Start Living.
That's it. Stop worrying and start living. That's the real summary of happiness. Stop worrying and start living. And Bishop Sheen wrote one of the great, he's a Catholic cardinal, I think, or bishop. I think it was Bishop Sheen. And brilliant guy, and he wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. It was a bestseller for years, still is. So there's an amazing appetite for that. And Harvard has discovered, or we discovered that at Harvard, the most popular course in years, maybe of all time, is a course on happiness given by a young Israeli. Do you have any idea how old he is? Is he an older guy or
middle age?
Middle age. An Israeli who teaches a course on happiness, and he gets more students to register for the course that there's standing room only, and people can't even get into the course. It's so popular. So it shows you there's a demand for a desire for achieving happiness, and yet so few of us, even the richest, we're the wealthiest country in the world, the United States, and with all the wealth, we were not the happiest. You think if wealth and material things brought happiness. Here's a chart that Len prepared, or that he dug up, or discovered, that the UN, it's the United Nations, does it, or some segment of the United Nations?
Yeah, I think so.
And it defines the countries in terms of their level of happiness vis-a-vis the rest of the countries of the world. Interestingly, the most happy in 2024 was Finland. Not a very wealthy country, not a country that's famous for yachts and private planes or anything like that. For material, that's number one. And the others that in the top 5 or 6 are the top 5 actually are all Scandinavian countries. Finland, Denmark. I don't know if Finland's considered Scandinavia.
Yeah.
It is? Finland, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Remarkably, Israel's number 5. They're always being attacked. They're always being criticized by the whole world. The Jews are always, I don't know if attacked is the right word, or what is the anti-Semitism prevails against them. There's hostility towards them, and you think, well, my God, that would make them pretty depressed. But they support each other, they love each other, and it's not very little to do with material. It was not a gifted country, had no natural resources all around them. Every country around Israel, every Arab country, every Muslim country around Israel has tons of oil. It's the only country in that area that the other places, you stick a straw in the ground and oil comes up. So, but Israel's the happiest, number 5. Then the Netherlands is number 6, Norway's number 7, Luxembourg is number 8, Switzerland is number 9, Australia is number 10. That's because they're away from everybody, so they can be happy. New Zealand is next to Australia, 11, and so on and so forth. The United States comes in, where's the United States here? In 24, the United States, the wealthiest country in the world, comes in at number 23. Even after the United Arab Emirates, even after Lithuania. It's unbelievable. Ireland is number 16, and Canada is number 15. No wonder Canada doesn't want to become another state. They're 15. They don't want to go from the 15th happiest country to part of the 23rd happiest country. So it's just amazing that, oh my God, Kuwait is number 13. It's hard to believe Kuwait is number 13. The women are mistreated. I guess they got a lot of money and they have nothing to do with it except distribute it to their native people. All the people that work are brought in from outside, from the Philippines, from Thailand, from Bangladesh. So it's really intriguing to analyze that chart because you'd think the United States being the wealthiest country in the world, it would be right up there as number 1, or at worst number 3 or 4. And here they are way behind Kuwait, which I just said was number 13. The United States number 23. Austria is 14. Belgium is 16. It's just so hard to believe. It's eye-opening. Anyway, so what's the evidence? There's a desperate desire on the part of people throughout the world to achieve happiness. It's demonstrated by the course at Harvard. They never had a course as popular as the course that Professor Brooks is teaching at Harvard on how to be happy. And there's more books out recently and throughout the years on how to be happy. And in that light, I wrote a book called, it's on your screen now, Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back. At the bottom of the cover, it says, how to be happy no matter what. And my goal is to reach out to especially you all who are tuned to this podcast, since you're my favorite people and take the time to join me every Wednesday. to make sure that you achieve the maximum happiness and the least suffering or the least aggravation, the least agita, that the Italians call it agita, and focus on the good things in life, on the future, on hope, on being upbeat and optimistic. So, number one, just decide that you're going to make yourself happy. You're the boss. What you think determines how you feel, your emotion. And if you feel good, you're going to be happy. If you smile, it makes you feel happy, even if you're just acting. If you smile, it's hard to feel sad. And if you're just acting and you got a crying role or a sad role, even though it's just acting, that emotion hits you and you become depressed. So you control your emotions. You don't control what happens to you, but you control what you think about what happens to you, and also how much you let it dominate your thinking. How much negative thoughts are allowed into your mind, failures, tragedies. You could spend all your life focusing on those things. Disappointments, heartbreaking relationships, your girlfriend abandoned you, broke off with you, or your boyfriend. There's so many things that could upset you and for weeks and months make you, and maybe for years, make you miserable. So I can't give you all the answers right now on one foot, but I could tell you this. If you take control and you make up you're going to be happy, you can make it happy. Everybody else could help make you miserable. They don't have the time to spend making you happy because they're too busy being self-indulgent and trying to make themselves happy. So, and the fastest way I could think of is for you to become happy and learn how to be happy is to acquire a copy of this book, Happiness Guaranteed, or Your Misery Back. And the only reason I can say that with such certainty, absolute certainty, is everybody who's ever reported back to me on this book, maybe they just want to be nice, so the ones that hate it don't call me, but every single person, whether they got it themselves as a purchase at their bookstore or on Amazon, or they got it as a gift, whatever, they call me, spontaneously and say thank you. Rarely have I've written other books. Rarely have I ever gotten the kind of spontaneous response and gratitude that this book has brought me. So, and to ensure that you are motivated to get the book for your happiness, because I care about you. If you don't make yourself happy, I'm going to come around to your house. I'll find out your address, and I'll beat it into your brains, into your very being, that you make yourself happy. There's nothing more important. And your happiness is contagious. Your kids will be happy if you're upbeat, if you're optimistic. It's really like when you smile. It costs you nothing, you lose nothing, and it spreads joy to wherever you go, because people smile back at you and they feel better. And the same thing or the opposite is true with respect to if you got a sour puss or you're crying or you're miserable, you spread your misery. So to induce you to get the book, I'm saying if you buy this book, it's better than any deal you get on television. They say, if you don't like the product, send us your purchase slip and we'll send you back the money. I will not only send you back your money if you don't like it, if you're not happy with it. if you're not thrilled with it and get a lot of value out of it, send me back your purchase slip, and I will not only refund your money, you can keep the book, and I'll send you back double your purchase price. So you got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Just don't go out and buy 100 books and double your money on 100 purchase slips. Oh, so without further ado, be happy, please. I don't want to have to come around to your house. It's too much effort for me at my stage of life. So I will warn you, though, that if I find out you're not happy in doing the things that I'm urging you to do in this book, and even at the beginning of each program each week, you're going to put the burden on me to come around and force you to be happy. Not easy, but if you make up your mind to be happy, you will be. So God bless you, and I hope today is the beginning of your increasing happiness in life and overwhelming happiness throughout your life. So now, without further ado, we'll get to the misery. The news of the week, the main events of the week as we uncovered them, as they keep uncovering politically and economically and internationally in terms of wars and contentious competition. Competition is good. It motivates people to do better. But contentious competition, like we always hate somebody. The United States is always, the enemy is Russia, the enemy is China, and China has the same thing. The enemy is the United States. And so we should get to the point we're all on the same boat and we all benefit from the same things or suffer from the same things. So we should share our happiness and our good feelings and convey them to others, share them with others. Len, you want to sort of hit the main targets of the week?
Sure. So one of the things that's been, I think, a benefit to the second Trump presidency is we're all learning about civics. We all learned about the three branches of government and how they function within the government, how they check and balance each other. And what we're seeing these days is some tension and some interesting constitutional issues about that. So specifically, they say the executive branch, which is chartered with enforcing laws, has the power of the sword because they are in charge of police and military. The legislative branch is the Congress. They have the power of the purse because they are in charge of appropriating funds. And the judicial branch has no such power of either of those major hammer type of things. So up until now, the courts have been able to exert check and balance on the other branches of the government because the other branches of the government and the people there did what the court said. When the courts impose a decision, it was abided by. Even in the 70s when Congress wanted the tapes from Richard Nixon, at first he said no, take a hike, and the courts eventually, the Supreme Court said, no, you got to turn them over. And when they did, when the court said sorry, Mr. President, you need to turn them over, he did. And so he respected the court. Today, we're asking the same questions. What happens if the executive branch doesn't do what the judicial branch says they have to do? Who is there to enforce or to make sure that it happens? So specifically, this is all sort of predicated around President Trump's recent statement where he said, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." So just two specific things. There was a federal judge in Rhode Island that said the Trump administration violated the plain text of an earlier ruling where the court said that the government must unfreeze certain appropriations that went to environmental health and other programs. Then there was another case in Washington where the court said that the administration should reinstate USAID workers, that the president, so the Justice Department said the president should have the authority to decide how to run the government, but yet the Congress appropriated funds for certain programs and other activities. So the big question is, are we headed toward some kind of constitutional crisis? And what happens if the executive branch, the president, just ignores the judicial branch, the courts? I mean, up until now, like I said, there's been a respect, and even though the court doesn't have the same kind of teeth, there was a respect, that they could hold them in contempt, right? I mean, a judge can hold someone in contempt if they fail to follow a court order, but who's going to enforce the contempt, right? Who's going to drag the person into jail? That's the executive branch. What happens?
I should point out, you were very clear, but I should point out that that concept of if you doing right by your country, if you're trying to make it better, then you can't do any wrong. It can't be against the law. And that concept was quoted by I'm terrible with names, by the French leader and general Napoleon. Napoleon said, if you're doing the right thing for your country, it can't be against the law. So it's the other thing I take issue with that you opened with is you say all Americans or all of us are now, involved in civics and aware of civics.
Are getting a
getting more
forced education, I should say.
More exposure.
a crash course.
But if you
crash course in civics, whether they like it or not.
If you watch on the street interviews,
that is true.
When they ask people at college, high school, or who's Marco
Rubio?
What?
Secretary of State?
Yeah.
Rubio?
Marco Rubio. Who's Marco Rubio? They say, is that the third baseman for the Mets or something? I mean, they have no idea who the Secretary of State is, who the Secretary of Commerce is. Not that it's urgent that they know that, but even the top leaders that make our lives what they are every day, they're totally unaware. There's very little knowledge of civics. So hardly anybody.
Well, I think anyone who graduated high school had an exposure. Whether they remember it, whether they paid attention, whether they were awake is another story. But they had an exposure.
Yeah, but they avoid that more than they avoid the exposure to diseases.
That could be.
It doesn't impact them. They heard it, they did.
That's true.
And it's like off a duck's...
water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you ask him who's the vice president of the United States, I think at least 80% of them, of Americans, can't name the vice president.
Well, what's
except maybe at election time.
What's particularly concerning, I think, is that these issues are nuanced issues, right? Because, while you may think, well, what's wrong with the Department of Justice, saying what they say or having the administration withhold funds, doesn't, maybe they were not, it was a bad program. Well, the point is, it doesn't really matter if it's a bad program. It was appropriated by Congress, and we have a government set up in this way. If you have a problem with something, the solution is not just to say, well, I'm doing best by my country, so therefore what I'm doing is justifiable. So it is kind of nuanced, but I think it's an important nuance because it gets to the essence of what makes a democracy a democracy. It's respect for the other branches of government.
Right, it's by an elected majority, but it's amazing that a lot of the things that the majority of Americans are for are nevertheless neglected or disregarded by the Congress. For example, the demand for more gun control, even after major disasters.
But that's a delinquency of duty by the Congress who don't represent.
I'm saying, but that's not a democracy. A democracy, as we define it, is ruled by a majority, and we don't have that. It's an imperfect.
Well, it's
democracy.
A republic where you represent people, but at least that's not, a violation, right,
or in contradict,
right. I mean, you have if your elected official is not representing you as a constituency, then you have the ability and the obligation to dispose of that person. Not and that person gets replaced with someone who the electorate likes better, and then it moves on. But when one branch of government just says, well, I don't think I want to do that, what do you do? I mean, what do you do?
It's interesting that the Constitution says absolute words, clearly stated. They were very intelligent, the forefathers that prepared this. And you'd think when it says it in writing, it's clear. And yet language is such that after it's written down, it's subject to different interpretations. You could read it and I could read it, and we come to different conclusions. I once had a professor who I thought was very incisive, because I never realized that. He said, when somebody writes a book and then you ask the reader his opinion of the book, and he'll give one view, and the guy who wrote it will say, no, you got it wrong. But the reader read what he read and interpreted it, and he got it right, even more, maybe more right than the author, because the author knows what he intended to convey, what he intended to write should mean, and people read it and get a different interpretation. So that was a brilliant insight to me, because I always thought the author knows what what it says. So why are you telling them it doesn't say that? But people.
Well, but I think that's why there's the judicial branch, because the Trump administration is interpreting its powers. It's interpreting, and that's what the judicial branch is supposed to interpret what is written and what that actually means in the context of this specific situation. So they might, and there's two sides, right? When the case is argued to the Supreme Court, one side is interpreting the situation this way, the other side is interpreting the situation this way. The court is
That's why
chartered to make a determination: is it this? Is it this? And then when it does, the loser is supposed to say, "Okay, I'll accept this interpretation and abide by it." And
that's why
where we are now is what happens if they say, if the loser is in a position. See, like when you bring an action, like in say a civil case, and one side loses and one side wins, the loser can jump up and down and be annoyed and mad and angry, but the winner prevails to and has the support of like the executive branch, because then he can enforce his judgment and get funds or whatever, garnish wages, get whatever, and so there's a support for that.
Well, presumably.
But what happens if the executive branch is the one that loses? Then there's nobody to enforce the loss.
Well, presumably, if a guy feels wronged, often, but not always, he has a right to appeal and go to a higher court and see if he could
until he gets to the Supreme Court, and then that's the last law. That's the final decision.
But I'm saying you don't always get the right to appeal if the judge says, "Look, there's no basis."
Right.
It's clear cut that the jury felt strongly that their decision was based on all of the facts.
Right. So what happens?
But that's why
this is uncharted waters.
Plato didn't endorse democracy. He felt, and there's something to that, because I think that's Trump's attitude. He felt that it ultimately should go, everybody can vote for delegates and so forth, and those delegates should meet and get together and confer and pick the most brilliant one that they think will do the best job. So it's a consensus of not let's appoint the guy who got the most votes, because the public is a fool and they don't know what they're doing most of the time, and they're subject to promotion and propaganda and misleading statements. So you're giving it to some brilliant guy. So, and that sounds like a brilliant idea, because it's democratic, because they choose all the people that choose the top guy. And, like when Kennedy was elected, I think he picked so many brilliant guys, top guys out of Harvard and Yale and so forth. It was very impressive. It's too bad that he was killed so early in his tenure. And he might have been ineffective anyway, but he did pick really brilliant leaders. Currently, some of the people that Trump has picked leave a lot of questions about their capacity to hold those positions, and even lots of arguments against their ability to hold their position or their integrity even. So Trump is saying, I'm smarter than the masses. The masses are vulnerable. They're subject to whoever twists their arm, and he proves that too, because He's a great salesman, and he knows how to sell his positions better than others that may be more qualified in many respects. So it's with human beings, it's always tough.
Yeah. I mean, not only does he think he's smarter than the electorate, but also many other advisors or economists and people who you think may have some knowledge into the workings of the economy and whatnot, which is the next issue of the power of the presidency and the executive branch. We talked a lot about tariffs and how most economists believe that they're generally not a good idea in terms of reciprocation, trade wars, but a lot of people that are supporting Trump's tariff plans point to they're being used as negotiation tools as opposed to real economic levers. So the question I wonder is, with respect to reciprocal tariffs, so not you and I trade, and all of a sudden I wake up one day and I say, I don't like you because you're not doing enough on my border or whatever, so I'm going to impose 25% tariffs on your goods, before which we had 0-0. But suppose you have tariffs on my imports, and for years I ignored that. So years and years go by, and for whatever reason I didn't reciprocate. So now you're tariffing my goods, and I'm not tariffing your goods, which I think is an argument that Trump is making, saying for years that the U.S. has been abused, treated unfairly, he uses those terms, because there's lots of countries that tariff U.S. goods high, and we don't tariff their goods. So I'm going to put tariffs as a reciprocal action, not as a first blood, not as, right, but as a reciprocal action to what you've already done to me. So is something like that a smart move? Because and then you use it as a bargaining position to say, look, you started it, right? You tariffed me. How could you call me out on tariffing you when you already tariffed me? It's like a Jackie Mason routine. You tariff me, I tariff you. Right?
Because it's counterproductive. We went through what was that?
No,
what was the age called when each gold was the most important thing? So the way that you got the most gold was you put tariffs on, so they couldn't send their goods to your country,
right?
So they couldn't get your gold, and you put high tariffs on what they were sending to you, but no tariffs on what you sent to them. So you were biasing them against getting business from you, and you got more gold from them because people.
Right. But then they do the same thing back to you.
What was that called?
Mercantilism.
Mercantilism, the age of mercantilism.
Right. So then they do it to you, and then it's.
And we have a laboratory experiment, not a laboratory experiment,
right?
A real experiment in life, that they did it to each other, and it stopped all trade.
But the solution is to both remove, right? But in this case, we have a situation where we're not starting 0-0.
You can't have a solution like that because for a solution you need both sides to agree, and often one side says, "I'm not agreeing to that." So
you let them win?
No, you just stop buying their stuff. Nobody forces you to buy stuff from China. You just don't buy anything from them. If they put a tariff on it.
But what do you do with countries that today already have tariffs on U.S. goods? Not new tariffs. They've had them for years.
If including the tariff, it's still attractive, you buy it.
No. It's they're tariffing U.S. exports. We don't tariff their goods. Like they tariff our goods. Like we send cars to Europe.
Right.
They tariff our goods. That's why nobody buys U.S. cars in Europe, because they tariff our goods. We don't tariff their goods. Is that fair? So what Trump, I think, is doing, we'll see how it plays out, is he says, look, it's not a new tariff. I'm not tariffing you something that you didn't already tariff me, right? You started it.
It depends.
And so we'll put, we can negotiate this.
I think it depends on the basis on which they established those tariffs. Maybe there was a good reason.
What's a good reason?
They were underselling or they were supporting their auto companies with special.
And so we should tolerate
subsidies.
That?
No, we shouldn't tolerate it. We shouldn't deal with them.
But
we have options of dealing with countries.
But if they won't take, if they're preventing our goods from being sold in their country because they're tariffing our products coming into their country.
But if they're tariffing it because we're subsidizing ours, so it should be cheaper for us to deliver in their country, they have a justifiable reason.
Okay, so then don't we have the same reason to tariff their products then?
No, but I'm saying each side raises the ante and then it stops all. We went through that. Each side, you raise me, I raise you.
But that's why. But then if you don't do that, then one side gets away with it.
They don't get away with
it.
They stop. Nothing forces you to go and buy or sell to one country.
That hurts the exporter. That hurts the U.S.
It should hurt the exporter if we're angry with Russia, with Europe for subsidizing their farm products, so they're more competitive against American farm products. If we put a tariff on their farm products, it's just evening the thing. So sometimes it's appropriate to punish them in some way.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, it depends what the reason is.
And so,
but since we've had experience where it doesn't work, where you go, oh yeah, you're going to raise tariffs for me, I'm going to raise yours even more, and then if it stops, they're losing the benefit of capitalism,
right?
Where each one produces what they produce.
But if you do it as a retaliation to get them to then back down, then it worked. Because if Europe has been tariffing our goods for years, and we haven't tariffed their goods, then they're taking advantage of us. We've let them get away with it. We didn't reciprocate for years.
They don't have to tariff it. What if they just subsidize their farm products so they can deliver it cheaper to this country?
Right, but
so then we decide we're going to deal with that by putting tariffs on. But then you go into a race.
There are many countries today that tariff U.S. goods into their country, but we don't tariff theirs back. So Trump says that's not fair. We're not starting a tariff war. You guys already started it by tariffing us. We just didn't retaliate.
Again, I say it depends on the reason.
So we'll see. I mean,
if a country is just starting to grow and become, competitive with the rest of the world and needs the business for jobs and so forth, then you have to tolerate some of that. You don't destroy them in their inception. So but you don't start wars.
I'm saying I agree with starting it, but this specific issue is like Act 2. We're not starting
but Act 1 was appropriate. Countries that first start out, they have nothing going.
All right, so maybe
they got to.
I don't know if that's fair. That's fair, but maybe I guess that's why you have to look at it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Because maybe Act 1 doesn't last 50 years.
Yeah, that's why a lot of countries start off that are from nothing. They start off as communist because they can't go straight to capitalism. So they got to deprives the people from getting higher wages right away and getting so that they become competitive and can enter the rest of the world. Most countries don't start off as free enterprise because they're not capable of competing at that level. So they gotta keep their wages low so they could enter the market and get some business.
So
it's not, economics is not as easy.
Yeah.
It has repercussions. Every step you take has repercussions. If you recognize that a country is just starting out from the bottom and they're doing things to help their manufacturers or their farmers, you should tolerate it. You should let them get off or you could punish them and say, we're not going to take that crap because they sell into our country cheaper. But to me, if they sell into our country cheaper, to me, that's a benefit. To me, the negative balance of payments says that we're getting bargains because we wouldn't be tolerating it if we didn't enjoy the benefits of those lower prices. And that accounts for the negative balance of payments.
So we'll see what the effects are, but not many economists don't think a trade war and a tariff war will reduce inflation. So if it does wind up raising price level,
it won't reduce it.
I'm saying most economists say it will raise price level,
right? Except
Trump. So
Trump doesn't say it, but he says it's going to help pay for our deficits, as if they're getting the money from the United States. They're getting it from the people of the United States.
But he did run on a platform of lowering prices,
Well, he's dreaming.
So my question, what I wonder is,
I don't know. I think he doesn't understand economics.
Correct. So let's suppose that's true, and he doesn't get it right. What do you think the reaction from the base will be? I mean, will they turn on him? Do they just say, "Well, it's Biden's fault"?
Probably Biden.
It's
Biden's fault.
Do they get killed in the midterms? 2 years from now, it's possible inflation is higher than it is now.
Let's say it's Biden's fault. He let it happen. If he identifies that negative balance of payments as bad for our country, then it is. If he's right, then it's Biden's fault because he let it persist for so long. But I'm always happy when we have a big negative balance because it means we're getting a lot of goods from these countries that produce it very cheaply and make it available to our consumers.
Given the impact that tariffs can and probably will have on our economy and the world's economy, do you think that there should be some legislation or something to prevent one person, the president, from having the power to damage the world's economy? If you think about the power that the tariff, Trump calls himself the tariff man, has, it's enormous. And should, I wonder myself how this is something really important. Is that really a function of the executive branch? How is that an executive branch function?
That's why I like the British system. You know why?
Trigger government, where you have a mandate by definition.
No, I'm saying when the party that wins
that's a mandate by definition.
They have the right, and if they don't do right with that mandate, they're kicked out.
Right.
So here we don't have that. So they could have a sudden election. We got to wait every time 4 years.
Right, trigger government. That's what they call it.
So once a guy gets in, he's got the right to.
So, but how do we fix that?
Shots.
Do we have? We could pass legislation in the Congress president would have to sign it, or I
Yeah,
guess it could be overruled.
I know, so
Well, it could be over. The Congress can pass legislation without the president if the veto's overruled with 2/3.
yeah, but very hard.
Very hard. But let's say let's ask the question, should something like that exist where the president can't have economic power like that? I mean, I don't see how that's an executive function. I see how commander-in-chief is an executive function. I see how, but how are you, what laws are you enforcing? If the executive branch is supposed to enforce the law.
The president is commander-in-chief of the economy.
I guess. Or he says it's a national emergency.
No, as what's his name says, as Napoleon said.
And he who saves his country does not violate any law.
If you're doing the right thing by your country, it's not against the law. It's the guys that are trying to stop him are using the law
They're the bad guys.
To defeat your country's interests. It depends on which side you're on. They take it. We're doing the right thing because we're stopping the president from being wild. And the president says, "What do you mean stopping? They invited they voted for me in the majority, so that I could implement my plan." That's why I think the British system, where if you don't do the right thing,
they have a vote of no confidence, and then you're
right away. The government has changed.
So we have time for, I think, one more question, and another issue we've seen with the executive branch by overseeing, controlling the Department of Justice, who prosecutes
Department of Injustice,
as the case may be, whose job is to prosecute and enforce. We saw, the last few days, the DOJ advocating to drop the case against Eric Adams, the mayor of New York. Right. You think, what's your sense of that in terms of, do you think, as some do, that it's a quid pro quo for Mayor Adams's supporting Trump's immigration agenda and coincidentally being rewarded with a dropping of corruption charges against him?
You got to look at the facts. For example, Eric Adams' position is, I was in favor of this all along. I announced all along that I'm against what's happening with the so it had nothing to do with any offer that they made. But if he committed murder and we have the evidence of murder, all the rest is irrelevant, what he said before. And that's why so many guys are resigning, prosecutors, because they got the evidence, and a grand jury has found them guilty, and three of his appointees, his own appointees, are leaving.
It is a little coincidental in timing that, after he meets with Trump and after he meets with the Homeland Security. He said he's going to convert
to Republican. He needs Trump because right now Andy Cuomo has a good chance of winning.
Yeah.
I don't know who else.
I think the smart thing the DOJ did was they didn't drop the charges with prejudice. So that means they can bring him back anytime they want. And if he gets out of line, guess what? They'll be coming back.
Yeah. If he doesn't live up to his... Well, in a way you could say the system works that way all the time, because they'll let off murderers and give them a pass if they agree to testify against the bigger guy. So
a deal.
That's in our law. There's a bigger fish, so the hell with, we'll let this guy get away with murder. The guy's confessed to murder. It's an imperfect politics and government leadership is an imperfect science. You can make every argument, and if it turns out well, then the guy who made the wrong decision confirmed that he did the right thing. If everything that Trump is doing now turns out right, the economy booms and everything's great, it won't matter. It doesn't matter that he's indicted 12 times and you know, right now he's promising to deliver better results. That's all the public cares about. If eggs come down by a lot, that'll be more important than whether he followed the rules precisely.
Yep. And with that,
is it over?
Yes, we can.
It's too good to be true that
we can wrap it up. And
that was excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being so tolerant and listening to this. I don't say it's gibberish, but this never-ending argument. He's right, I'm right, everybody's right. Like the guy went to the rabbi, the couple, and they say they have a big fight between them. So the rabbi says to the wife, tell me what's the story? So the wife tells the story. The rabbi says, you're right. Then the husband tells his side of the story. He says to the husband, you're right. So his number one counselor, his assistant, his deputy says, Rabbi, that can't be. You said they're both right. He said, you're right too.
They both can't be right.
You gotta be cooperative and make peace. Two of my daughters are marriage counselors. So they're always telling me how hard it is when they first come in, the husband and wife. They don't let the other one get a word in edgewise. They're screaming at the psychiatrist. So I said, it's so hopeless, She tries to calm him down. She said, look, we're trying to work this out. I said, when you see that, tell them you're both right. You should get out of this marriage. That's it. But But my daughters don't want to give up the income. Everybody's right in this world, in their own mind. Guys go to get hit for murder, and the mother will say, "He's such a good son. He never could be. It never." Both sides are. Depends where you're coming from. Which side your bread is buttered on.
We shall meet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Len Carter. Thank you all for joining us again this week. I look forward to meeting with you all again next week. Hopefully, Len Carter will be available. Otherwise, we'll try to induce some other exciting guests to join us. Last week we did have Rabbi Seiderman, a rabbi, a lawyer, very brilliant guy. And we try to get people that have brains and can make good arguments. They may not be right, but they can make good arguments. And then it's up to you, the jury. The audience is the jury. You're the jury that decides. And it's not easy. Like many cases, juries have a hard time and then often feel afterwards maybe they didn't do the right thing. Anyway, you all do the right thing all the time. But if you want to do the right thing, make yourself happy. Stay upbeat. Live with hope. Think of the future, bringing good things. We're all going to go through hardships, but we will overcome and appreciate what you have. The most important thing you have, you take for granted. Your good health. You get up in the morning, your eyes work, your fingers work. We take that for granted. That's like automatic. But if we lose that, if somebody loses that and gets it back afterwards, it's a new world for them. They don't care about money. They don't care about... And there's guys that have literally billions of dollars that are miserable with all the wealth and all the assets they have because they don't have the things that you and I take for granted. we don't count those as important blessings till we lose them. So enjoy that your eyes work. When you get up in the morning, look out the window and your eyes work and you see colors and you see nature, and you walk outside and you walk on a beach and you see the waves in the ocean and the sand on the beach. That song, there's a song, the best things in life are free, and that's true, because it's things you can't buy. The sun in the morning, the moon at night, the waves on the beach, the sand at your feet. It's things that are intangible but so precious. So you are all precious in my mind. Thank you for joining me. You're the ones that make this program, whether it's a large number or a small number. I'm sure it's going to be growing. And as long as some of you benefit, that's a good beginning. Have a great week. God bless you all. See you next Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Bye.